Yeah, and it's really so good to see you, Dominic. When did we see last time? It was in Dublin.
It was.
It was in
Dublin.
spring.
Late spring.
Yeah, spring, and it was great fun, great conversations.
And fantastic setting on the farm just outside Dublin.
It was so beautiful, right? And you're also a farmer, right? Or kind of farmer or something like that, or what is that?
Well, we live on a small holding. So we've got some cows and pigs and chickens and geese.
And just for fun, or are they producing some milk and some eggs for your household?
No milk, but beef herd, small beef herd of pedigree belted Galloways. So they're actually black and white stripes cows. Just rare breeds. We realized, my wife and I realized a few years ago that the only processed food really that we still ate was sausages and bacon. So we thought, let's get some pigs, and then we ended up buying the small holding. So then we had, if we didn't cut the grass, we needed something to keep the grass down. So we bought some cows. I like the cows, so then we bought some more fields.
Okay.
So I have more cows.
So it grow. Okay.
Just good fun.
Yeah. It's somehow slowing down the life a little bit also, right?
Well, it means that there are ample opportunities to, we, as coaches, we spend all of our times, I suppose, using our brains. So, it's nice at the weekend to go out and fire up the chainsaw, or, go and get up in the morning, go and feed the cow some hay or stuff. Just, you feel like you're doing things with your hands outside, and I feel much more connected to the seasons. I know, very conscious of changes in temperature outside and changes in day length, and
so it's somehow
letting the chickens in and out every day. You've got to
get up early.
Yeah.
So you're more connected somehow, right?
Yeah, and the other driver was space for the kids to play. So just say to the kids, well, you can just go outside and play, right? And spend a lot of time outside. So
that's good.
It's nice.
Yeah, that's nice. But you don't have such a big dog, such a Irish. What was it?
Wolfhound.
Wolfhound.
Like Brian. No.
Like Brian.
No, and we don't. And we don't have a goat living in the house.
Yeah. A goat which thinks she is a dog, right?
That's right. Yeah. We've got two chocolate Labradors.
Oh, nice.
But they don't live in the house either. They're like all the other animals. They're
somewhere outside
yeah.
stables and so on. Okay, I guess they have a good life as well. Okay, Dominic, maybe let me introduce you a little bit first. So, Dominic, you are an entrepreneur. You have scaled 2 big companies from 0 to 30 million pounds in a short time, within 5 years. So you made this whole trip.
That's right.
You're a podcast host. The podcast name is The Melting Pot. I've listened to some of the episodes. Meanwhile, it's very interesting, very nice. We will talk a little bit later. You are, kind of a farmer now as well. I think, but you also use your farm or your estate for workshops and things like that, right?
That's right. They when I'm working with clients, I coach CEOs and their leadership teams.
Yeah.
And I suppose when we started this journey, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we were doing those offsites either at the client's, we're doing those sessions either at the client's office or in hotels. And so often you didn't get the right environment. You'd be in a basement with no windows, or it would be too hot or too cold, or the food would be terrible, or the coffee would be terrible. Or just, it was hard to create a great environment. So we built... stole the name from Jim Collins. He's got the management lab in Boulder, Colorado. So we have the management lab in Wiltshire in the New Forest in England. And clients typically come down here for a day or 2 days a quarter.
Okay.
Get away from London, or even fly in from overseas and spend time together working working together with me on the farm.
So they don't get only just brain food, but also some soul food from your place here. That's nice.
That's right. You know, we've built a great oak framed building with glass on 3 sides overlooking the fields. So you've got great light, great energy, cows wandering around. You know, just going to the right space and away from work or away from a hotel just helps people reset, I think.
Yeah, and that's important to have really good ideas, create good strategies. You need to get away, make some pause, some breaks.
Yeah.
Dominic, and then you're an author of a book. Has a funny title, Fuck Plan B.
Yes, it is indeed.
I'm curious to hear. I read it meanwhile, but I want to hear from you what's about it from your side.
Okay.
And you're a scaling up coach, so you're a kind of colleague. And
that's right.
This is why we met in Dublin, and I hope we once will meet in your place. Would be fantastic.
That'd be great. I was talking with Vern about the next coaches event, and we were trying to do maybe spring or maybe it'll be the fall next year. Invite the European coaches to have the session here.
Yeah, would be fun. Dom, if let's maybe start a little bit with scaling up at the beginning, and then see where the journey will bring us to. And if you tell your new customers, what is scaling up? What do you tell them? What's your pitch here, or your stance to your story?
I typically start with, somebody rings me up, pings me an email. We end up on the phone, and I say, "What's on your mind? You know, what's the challenge?" And I think whatever it is, scaling up's a toolbox. And so, you know, whether it's a screwdriver or a spanner or, you know, hammer and nails, or like that within my scaling up toolbox, I've got the tools that can help them solve the problem that they've got. So sometimes they've heard of scaling up and they're looking for a practitioner and they find me. That's probably true about half the time. And the other half the time, they've not come across scaling up. They might have come across some other frameworks, you know, EOS or you know, they've come across other coaches and other frameworks. But really, I suppose it's how do we take people through a transition? I think there's sort of the way it shows up for me, or has shown up for me and shows up for clients, is, you know, if they're a smaller business, you know, several million, then maybe at about 35 people stop putting the cups in the dishwasher. Yeah. Right. And we've really got to get on top of the culture and what are those behaviors. And there's a transition point at sort of 50. There's a transition through 100. There's a transition point maybe through 300 people, and then another one at 1,000. And so trying to understand where they are. And as you go through that, you know, sometimes they think I've got hidden cameras in their office, because I can ask them if this is the problem that they think they face, or that this is the way it shows up. And I suppose it's my own experience and then coaching for sort of 9 years. You come across people. I was talking to somebody today. We're planning a 2-day event. And really, everybody turns up and thinks they have this unique problem, which is great, right? And that it is true for them. But I think when you've got with the experience that you and I've got, you know that you've seen that type of problem before, and these are the types of tools that are likely to help. And then you can say, well, maybe an intervention or a series of interventions looks like this, and then we help you get. What if you got to here? What needs to be true 3 years from now? Okay, well, I've got some tools that can help us get that clarity, that alignment, that pace back in your business. Or even, God, sometimes people are just not I was speaking to a lady a couple of weeks ago, and she's just not enjoying herself. She looks back 2 years, and the last 2 years have been amazingly successful for her business, but it's not as fun as it used to be. And she's now spending a lot of time doing stuff that's not her playing to her genius or her strengths.
Sweet spot.
Yeah. And it's like, can you help me? I mean, I've had clients who've said to me at the beginning when I've spoken to them, they said, I hate my company, and Monday mornings are like Groundhog Day. I get up in the morning, I get up on a Monday, and I think I'm going to go to work, and in front of my team, I'm going to fail to grow this business again. And if you can't make this fun in 6 months, then just, sell it. I'll just walk away. I'll just leave it to you, and you can sell it for me, because I'm done. And, I've had people in tears talking to me about their business. Just, how many people they feel are reliant on them, and how they feel that they've just outgrown themselves. The business has outgrown them. And I think there's a palpable sense of relief when people realize that they're not alone. And that I've seen people in this predicament, or worse or different, and I can help them.
I like this approach, what you said at the beginning, that you first, I have a picture like a white piece of paper, like a white sheet of paper. You don't have anything on your mind. You just listen and look, okay, what's up, what's in your mind at the moment. And then you somehow, that you have always a tool, whatever is coming, you have an answer or a good question.
Yes.
And and I experienced very similar things as you tell me here. I had one very funny situation with a CEO. He is a serial entrepreneur, and he said he experienced always the same thing. If his company starts getting over, let's say 50 people, the toilets suddenly start looking messy. And it's like a law, like a physical law. And he asks himself, why is this coming?
Well, yeah. And not only that, but you end up spending a disproportionate amount in the management meetings trying to work out what to do. And every company that went through 50 people has either decided to put up with mess. And in fact, I know what happens is, because in some companies you go in, and there's a note on the back of every toilet door, and the CEO's had his PA type it up, which is basically, if I come in the toilet and, you've weed on the floor, you're fired, right? And there's, command and control, there's sort of that approach. Some people give up.
Yeah.
And then other companies have sparkling toilets and they've got 350 people. And I just find it fascinating, because it's in there in the mental model of the CEO, and it's in there in the culture of the business.
And I think many entrepreneurs, they found companies because somehow they want to be free. They don't want to have rules. They don't want to, have all these things you have normally in big companies. Yeah, all these policies and all these things, and then they grow and they are successful and so on. And suddenly they have more and more people, and suddenly they start seeing that, oh my God, now I need rules. Now I need some policies. Now I need all this stuff. I need the middle management and so on. And they suddenly feel unfree. And I think the key message is that they need to, if they change their approach, if they are able to enable the next level to really do their own decisions, then they are free again, but on a larger scale. Can you follow?
Well, yes, but also the the first sort of valley of death that firms have to get through is that, single founder and maybe 10 to 12 employees, where the CEO is definitely the smartest person in the room, and everybody asks them for their opinion. And so they end up with this sort of parent-child relationship. And some people can give that up and some people can't. If there's two founders, maybe they get to 20, maybe that span of control gets them to sort of 20, 25 people. But at that point, they are then often the bottleneck in the business.
Yeah.
And that's why the success just means they feel beaten down. And then when the toilets are a mess, it's on them because nobody else takes any decisions in the business. It's only them. And they need to, it can be very scary to give that up.
Yeah.
But as you were talking about that, I was thinking, we had a client here a couple of months ago and we did a 2-day kickoff with them. So went through the process of doing some talent assessment, looking at every employee in the organization and saying, would we enthusiastically rehire them? Are they an A player? And we'd done that exercise on the second day. And the CEO said, do you know what? He said, we spent 2 days talking about the problems we've got in our business. If everybody in our business was an A player, would we have had any of those problems to discuss? And they all sat there and looked at each other and went, no. Like, we're trying to put rules and policies in, and we're trying to think about how we manage and how we measure. And frankly, when that business was only 6 people or 8 people, everyone was amazing. There were no rules. It was freeing. And so often what happens is the talent density starts to go down. The CEO's not hiring everybody. Not everybody's on mission. It's not this tight little unit that it once was. And I think that's where it needs that. Well, how do we get back to some of that and then not have bureaucracy in place, not need to have this bureaucracy to scale? Don't follow what big companies do. Do it differently.
Yeah. The one key you mentioned is the let's say the personal growth of the CEO. To change the way they approach their business, and that's really a challenge, big challenge. As you said, it's for some of them maybe even frightening, or they can't get away from their patterns. And then do you have any story how you were able to help somebody to change these patterns?
I think it's interesting. People have to want to change, right? I also think they have to be going towards something rather than away from something. So, wanting to lose weight, often what happens with people, I see it myself, you lose a bit of weight. If you're going away from something, early success starts to reduce the motivation. So you've got to have this idea that if the company has a purpose and the CEO, that purpose is, burns a fire in the chest of the CEO, then the decisions that are perhaps about me and my perceived control or impact or value are less important to me than me driving the company towards the purpose. And so it's much easier for me to step aside. We did work with a client for a number of years where the CEO admittedly had been very command and control. He said himself that was the case. His team agreed that was the case. And some of the challenge was actually not him stepping away or changing his behavior. I actually think he did an exceptionally good job of that. But his team were very used to him making all the decisions. And so in many ways, it was easy for them, right? So if he said do it and they did it and it didn't work, it wasn't their fault.
It was safe.
It was his fault. And so actually, so I think that for a CEO to change, there's a behavioral change at 2 levels. The CEO has to want it and then has to do it. But also the team have to step up and fill the space that he or she leaves behind, because otherwise it's going to be really easy for them to drop in. And in fact, I had a guy here last week, and I think people even can't conceptualize this idea of what it means to move away. So he said, well, my team said that I should be empowering them. And I'm like, And he said, so I stepped away and I left them to do it. And they've made a complete mess of it, and now I'm going to have to step back in because potentially we're going to lose our largest client. And it's like, that's not empowering. That's just abdication. You were in there doing it all yourself. You didn't coach people to take over the role that you were doing. You just stepped away and then watched them fail. Well, that's not very helpful for anybody.
That's a very classical pattern. I see this a lot.
Yeah. And so then it's because they're not convinced. So they sort of, it's almost, I think probably even, not even consciously, but subconsciously, setting the team up to fail so that they can come back in. Because if people are that sort of my control, my influence, my my personal value is wrapped up in how the business operates. And even for those people who say they want to change, they can be sort of self-sabotaging at a subconscious level.
Dominic, yourself, have you experienced great leadership in your life from somebody else towards you?
I have, yes.
Yeah. What?
I've had a couple of people that I've thought were outstanding. In fact, I've had people who, at the time I was working for them, I didn't enjoy it at all. And actually, in hindsight, I owe them a debt of gratitude because we just didn't connect at the time. But as I look back over time and as I've matured and grown up, I go, God, I bet they hated having me on their team. They hated me on their team as much as I hated being on their team, but they were great.
What made them great? What would you say? What are the main points for you?
And in that example, I'm thinking of a guy called Ken Austin, who was my boss when I was at Glaxo, and he took he was the sort of year after year after year, he was the number one regional sales manager in that organization, and he took a team of people and he created a really strong culture in his team. The team were known as Ken's Kamikazes. So the team had branded merchandise when the organization, the other teams didn't. And so he set up a them and us inside the organization so that you felt his team felt a passionate camaraderie. And he'd broken down, he knew what the inputs needed to be so that people could get the outputs they needed. So, I had to go and see 5 GPs, a practice nurse, and 2 pharmacists 5 days a week. And if I did that, I would hit my numbers. And so I found that very challenging.
So, but there was he gave you very clear goals, right? It was very clear for you what is your goal and what you have to achieve.
Yeah. So he was, but I think that whole sort of culture, team camaraderie, saying thank you and celebrating success as a team, he did that exceptionally well. And then I've got other people that I've worked for who were challenging in a different way, where they made me feel that I would walk over broken glass to impress them, or to do the things I'd committed to do for them.
So they created somehow a wish in you to perform well, to be really good. Okay.
Yeah. And raise my game and raise my expectations and be probably less selfish. So, some of the things we see in organizations, as is that, that they're not, their leadership team isn't really a team, it's a silo. And so, at Pier 1, the leadership there was the first time I felt that Fabio and then Gary had built an organization where the team couldn't win unless the team all went over the line together. Whereas in other organizations, you see it very clearly, marketing think they're winning and whether sales are winning or not isn't marketing's problem. Marketing are winning, or finance think they're winning, and they don't care whether the rest of the company is winning or losing.
Okay. It reminds me on the World Championship when Germany won when was it 2000? Was it 12 or 8 or 12? I don't. There was this headline in the newspapers. Argentina had Messi, but Germany had a team.
Aha.
And it was a little bit like that. I'm not so much into football, but this one was very nice, because seeing this final game, and they tried and tried and tried and never gave up. They always tried and helped each other to somehow. Only one needed to make the goal, and finally then they made this one goal. It was a situation like that. Yeah. And if I just summarize what you said, so raise expectations, being less selfish, working for the team, being challenging. So they were tough to you. They gave you clear feedback. They were not these kind guys. These comforting, everything is nice guys. They creating a wish in you to grow, to grow beyond your borders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that Fabio Banducci was famous for was the Banducci scale. And if you ask him a question, he'd give you the answer on a Banducci scale, which is his sort of 1 to 10. So I said to him one day, "How do you think I'm doing?" And he said, "I think you're 4 out of 10." Right? And it's
you thought yourself brutal. You are at 8 or 9 already, so something like that.
Well, it's brutal, right? And the thing is, I mean, there's some data from Gallup from 2020 or 2019, where performance was A, B, C, or D inside the organization, and all of the C and D players all thought they were above average.
Yeah.
Right. So I definitely thought I was better than a 4. And so anyway, he came and spent a week with me in the UK, and at the end of the week, he said I'd got up to a 7.5.
Wow, but that's a lot. Wow.
I got to keep my job.
Yeah. But so somehow, I think the art of leadership is to challenge, but not to destroy somebody, right?
Yeah. To
find this fine line. How far can you go to really challenge somebody, but still, yeah. I listened to the one podcast from you. I think it's maybe the one with what was the name? Rasmus Hugard. I like that very much. This idea, right. this distinction between being compassionate and empathy. So, and that the compassion is challenging, but because you see the good in somebody, but you know it's necessary to challenge him, to give him tough feedback because you want him to grow.
Right? Totally. Well, I mean, the same essence in Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor.
Yeah.
The bit that the challenge bit is often there, but it's possible to challenge and be a dick.
Yeah.
But if I care about you, then if that caring is there, then the reason I'm challenging you is because I think you could be a better version of you, and I think you want to be a better version of you.
Yeah. It's funny. Meanwhile, I bought the book, this Compassionate Leadership, and I read through it. And I just only was wondering that he didn't mention Kim Scott. I was thinking why she is not mentioned, but but he's a very serious researcher, so I think it's
totally
interesting. Dom, there's another really fun story for me, because, if we are in our workshops in Germany doing scaling up, or we call it scale up in Germany, and that we go to the part brand promise. Yeah, the brand promise part. There is one example always. We always have these company examples. And for brand promise, we have the example Rackspace. And we tell our clients how well did the Rackspace solve this question, and what a fantastic example this is. So, and you have been the CEO of Rackspace, so it's
well, I was running the European organization. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and I was there. When we wrote the core values, I was there. I didn't coin the phrase fanatical support. That was a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
But then some of that brand promise work I was involved in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would be for me interesting is, because I think all our clients try to understand who is my core customer. And it's sometimes really not easy to explain to them the difference between a core customer and a persona, for example. So how to find really this real human being and how to really understand what is the needs, what are the gains, what are the pains of this person. So maybe you can tell me about Rackspace or about other experiences from you as a coach with your clients. Where are the winning points here?
I can give you I can do a few of those bits in one go. So look, at Rackspace, we were providing internet infrastructure to revenue critical websites. So we weren't hosting brochure sites for people. It was e-commerce or core company infrastructure. And so if it broke, somebody would want to ring us up. At the time we started, most of the internet infrastructure was being delivered by telcos. And the telco business model was service is a cost. So they would try and have the cheapest possible people answer the telephone. And the people who answered the telephone often had, and you take 3 or 4 minutes pressing 5 for this and 7 for that until you get through to somebody. So we said, if you're the IT manager and you're our customer, and you have promised that you internally are going to deliver a great service to the business, and then your promise is contingent on us. When something breaks, it'd be great if we could pick up the phone in 17 seconds or 3 rings. And so we guaranteed that because that's important to our customer. And we also said, you'll always speak to a level 3 engineer. So you would speak to somebody who can fix your problem, and there's no call answering system. So what happens is you dial the number, 3 rings, it gets picked up by an engineer who can solve your problem, not some receptionist or call center in India or wherever.
Yeah.
And that is that sort of that really tight link. And often what we do is I remember we'd be in a pitch with a client, particularly if the client had small children, because we'd say, so Konstantin, next time you're up at 3:00 in the morning, give us a call and see whether the person picks up in 3 seconds, and see whether they're because we do our shift patterns so that people are in their daytime for them, not night shift, and it's not on call, and it's not the security guard in the data center who picks it up and puts you through to somebody else. It's a human being whose it's daytime for them, and they're happy to talk to you. And so that would often happen. Or we'd be in a pitch and we'd say, do you know what? Let's have a look. What's the number on the website? 0800 da, da, da. And we just dial it on the phone and we go 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Hello, Rackspace. It's Mark. How can I help you? Right? And we go, thanks, Mark. Just hang up. And it'd be that ability to the sales team. It wasn't a made up thing.
Yeah.
And so that linked back to the purpose. I think our purpose statement was probably fanatical support.
Yeah, and also to your competency, right? It's also it's so interesting how your promise drives your development of competency. That's fantastic.
Yes, and also that we're not hiding, but it's not a thing. You don't have to ring up your account manager and complain within the first 28 days. It was to try and take. The way I would describe it is our competitors were in the denial of service business, and we were in the service business, and so we had a very different philosophy, and that drove rapid growth.
Do you have any idea if we tell such a story to our clients, what is the method? How can they find such a fantastic, unique selling position for them?
Well, it's interesting. We did a bit of work with one of our clients in Spain called OnTruck, and we used the I suppose we did the core customer piece, and then we used the value proposition canvas from Alex Osterwilder, strategizer.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things we worked through there was they worked through and they said, okay, our core customer, we're a distribution business, on truck do distribution. Our core customer, one of the things they need to know is like, where is their pallet at any point? Now, our competitors can't do that. We can. We've got tracking on every delivery. And so I said, okay, well, where is your brand promise about this customer need? And they said, well, we've got 24/7 support. And I said, okay, I think there's a gap here. There's a big stretch between you understanding how the client perceives it and then the way you've written it, right? I don't think any of your customers will instinctively see that when they read 24/7 support, that solves their problem. It's like, I know where my stuff is every minute of every day. I said, and what's interesting is, let's go and have a look at your website. There's pictures of trucks on your website, but you don't sell trucks. There's no pictures of your customer. There's no picture of Fred, the distribution manager, saying, on truck, I know where my stuff is every minute of every day. And so they did some rework after that. And the CEO jumped on the phones with the sales team for a few days to see how this change in the pitch would work. Yeah. And for the next few months, they were growing 10% week over week.
Wow. Okay.
Because they fine-tuned their messaging to their core customer.
So they tested it like an split test, maybe even.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, so often in organizations, you know what it's like. We get an executive team together and they make a decision, and I think the difference between the ones that are amazing and the ones that aren't are what they're able to achieve in 90 days. Before we see them again. And in this case, it was, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and test this. Very sort of agile approach. We're going to change some we're going to change some words. We're going to change it now. Next week, I'm going to sit with the sales team. I'm going to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to iterate it again. And then I spoke to him and he said, look, we're growing 10% month over month. This is fabulous.
Wow. That's a great story. Dom, one of our USPs at scaling up is that I would say most of the coaches somehow are experienced entrepreneurs or at least top level managers. And so, and especially now we have these VUCA times, we have very, let's say, unsafe circumstances, crises occurring all over the world. And I think especially now it's of great value that we have this great experience as coaches. What would you tell these companies out there? Why should they come, or how should they use the scaling up framework, especially in these times where they are so uncertain?
I mean, everything's uncertain. Everything's uncertain all the time. I think if you look at, I suppose there's some negative uncertainty, right? I mean, if I look at clients, my own experience when we've been growing, 300% a year or 100% a year, or I talk to clients who are growing that fast, their lives are very, very uncertain.
Yeah,
but in a positive way, right? We've just had a client on the farm, and they went from 35 to 135 employees last year. They're now 200 and something employees. They've gone from being just in the UK to they've just opened their new office in the Netherlands. They're in Latvia. They're backed by SoftBank, so they're headquartered in Colorado. They're a tech unicorn, valued at more than $2 billion, growing massively quickly. So huge uncertainty for them, but in a good way, right? So anything they build now, decisions they make, things in some organizations that decisions that would then probably be in the same for 3 years, they come back 6 months later and the decision was the right one at the time with the data, and now it's gone. The reason I like scaling up is it's that you are stepping back from sort of an infinite game, an infinite future. That what is our purpose? Why are we doing this? And that is narrow enough to be valuable and emotional and meaningful, but broad enough that it still helps you make strategic decisions, but it's quite broad. It probably encompasses a lot of parallel universes, not just where your business is today. And then it's like, okay, well, 10 to 25 years from now, what's our mission or our BHAG? How will we measure our success? And then maybe typically I say to clients, look, how quickly are you going to double your business? So say 3 to 5 years, right? So here we are, 3 years from now, we're going to have doubled the business. What needs to be true then? And then what needs to be true in 12 months? And then what needs to be true in 90 days? And it's like, okay, well, let's get on and do the 90 days. So there's always this short-term focus. It's very agile. It's like taking the agile methodology from software development and bringing it to running your business.
Yeah.
And if clients embrace it in the right way, they can actually get away completely from an annual budget cycle. You've got the next 4 quarters. We get a quarter in, we can roll over. We can be, we had a client came to us at the end of their half year. The economic cycle is definitely impacting their business. So we looked at the annual goals. 3 of them were still valid. 2 of them weren't. We tweaked them, reset objectives for the half year. And I think that whole, every 90 days, the opportunity to say, are we still going in the right direction? Is everybody still focused on the right things? Like the guys yesterday, they know what they need to do is 500 partner signups a month. We've got so every single thing that every single person in their company does is what I'm being asked to do, or is what I'm spending my time on helping this company achieve 500 partner signups a month? No. Well, why are you doing it then? Right. And whether you're growing fast or there's an economic change, having that clarity that 500 partners a month is the thing that they need for economic success, it almost doesn't matter what's happening outside their business. They can control the things they can control. And assuming you don't run out of cash, that's one of the things you can control.
Yeah.
Then you are able to, you just every 90 days, like, are we still doing the right things? Does everyone agree we're doing the right? Like, it's just the pace with which organizations can change, and whether an economic downturn without feeling, it's not that it's not stressful, because it is, but with some confidence, and then be in a position that the moment they feel that the signs are in their favor, push their foot on the gas and go again, is I think is fabulous.
Yeah.
And so it's just bringing it down to something, 90 days. You can get your arms around it. It's not. It can be really tangible.
I like this answer a lot. Thank you. Especially I like the starting point when you said, "Oh, there are always uncertain times," and there was this radiation of this, relaxed look on these things, and this is what I like so much. And this is what comes out of the experience, because you saw so many things already, and you have seen already so many changes, and you there are ways through it. And the methodology you mentioned is like, you have the pole star on long term, so you know where you're heading towards your direction, but you're agile enough that you know that you really understand on short term what are the actions you have to take, and then you take them. That's very nice. Great. Dominic, another question. Let's talk a little bit about your book. What about your book? Tell me. What is Plan B?
Well, do you know what? I think the title really for me refers to going all in on something, the most important thing. And if I look at the table of contents, talent, purpose, values, engagement, candor, meetings, rhythm, environment, like, it's all culture. Right. None of that actually in the book is about strategy. And so it's not about having a series of things we could do. It's look, if we can get the best people together who are on a mission, like so much, it's going to be great fun, and we'll get somewhere. And so I think so often people are hedging or aren't committed to something. So they'll say, "Oh yeah, no, I absolutely believe we should have better talent, more talented people here. We should increase the talent density in our business." Don't do anything about it. Or I have CEOs who say, "There's a war on talent," and it's like, no, there isn't. There's only a war on talent if you're not committed to it. If I look at the CEOs of our clients who are growing really fast and have absolutely no problem hiring great people, the CEO is spending lots of his or her time and energy on solving the problem. Where the CEO says, "Oh, we can't win. There's a war on talent. We can't get great people. We can't afford talent." It's because that CEO has abdicated that to some head of HR who doesn't, and they're not really trying. Really, and so this is it's like, what type of business do you want to be? And then let's just commit completely to it. Let's not hedge. Burn the boats. That's it. That I've actually got a client, and that's one of the CEO's catchphrases is "let's burn our boats." So let's agree what we're going to do, and let's leave no room for retreat, so that the only way is through the jungle or whatever.
Okay, and this is the plan B. So the would be to keep the boats and go forward.
Yeah, because then what happens is you get that lack of candor, you get that lack of commitment, you get that lack of conflict, and people don't have to commit to the way forward because there's a way back, and it's like, nah, let's just agree how we're going to run this company, what we're trying to do. Let's just go do it. And so often there's that lack of focus. I was talking to a client this morning, and he said, "I've just come back from America, and there's this thing, and I've met these guys, and there's an opportunity." I went, "So that would be 3 different products, 3 different core customers. Are you really big enough to?" Yeah. And he's like, "Okay, maybe you're right." I said, "And also, you've told me you can't buy that." I said, "Look, I've just Googled that thing you said I can't buy, and I said I could buy that. Like you only want to build it. The only reason you can't see that you can buy it is because you want to build it. It scratches an itch, but actually, I think I could buy it already. You don't need to build it. You need to focus on the things that you're already doing." So often you go into clients and you say, if you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? And it'd be like, we start so many things, but we don't finish them.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just finish some of them.
Yeah. So, and where is it coming from? Is it because I often experience this, the founders are very, very, let's say, creative people. So they have a lot of ideas. Is this coming in the way, or?
Oh, I think so. I think that sort of visionary, certainly it looks as though lots of founders have, are dyslexic or have ADHD. They are optimistic. They have a high tolerance for risk, right? I mean, if these things weren't true, they'd just be employees still.
Yeah.
So they are, there's something about an entrepreneur that has got them to start something. And then so often, they're terrible at running meetings. Their admin is awful. But they can persuade a load of people to follow their, they can conjure Steve Jobs with his sort of distortion field, or just reality distortion field. To be successful, you've persuaded some people to join you. You've persuaded some customers to buy your stuff. And so quite often with, when we were talking earlier about where CEOs find themselves really not liking their business, it's often that what's happened is they've ended up owning this administrative task or this operational task that is not their genius. And they haven't got a team or a person or an infrastructure to do the stuff that they're not good at, so that they can focus on the thing that they're amazing at. And then you put that in place, and people are like, I get to do what I'm good at again.
Mm-hmm. You talked about this focus thing, and I experience often the companies in these times, they are coming from, let's say, kind of a service, something, they have some services, software services, or programming services, or some consulting type of services, and they all now think we need to have a product now. Something that can scale up, scale, because service is not so scaling. You have to sell hours all the time. And then they somehow struggle because they lose focus.
Oh, yeah.
How do you deal with these guys?
Well, look, you've got all these services companies that want a product.
Yeah.
And every product company I talk to wants a services arm. Right. And
okay.
It's interesting. There's two things spring to mind. One is, actually, there's a couple of things. One is I was chatting to one of our clients who are Macquarie Telecom Group in Australia, who are growing their Azure consulting business faster than anybody else in Australia. And that's because they're focusing on monthly recurring revenue. So they've got a real focus on their profit per X. Like, what is it? They've got a real clear business model. And I think that's where, the product and the service thing, that it's not, it is defocusing, but those businesses, the great product businesses and the great services businesses, have different DNA, right? And so I think it's really hard, unless you're doing a bit of services in service of your product, or you're doing a bit of product in service of your services. We had one client that was a product company, and they had an accidental services business, which they then sold to Accenture for £1 gazillion. But they really did. The founders really wanted a product business, but they built their consulting business up to £15 million in 3 years, because that's how they were funding the product development. I think those are two very different businesses. The DNA of those businesses is different. The management overhead is different. I remember the CEO at NetSuite, after he'd been bought by Oracle. They used to have a product business revenue stream and a consulting business revenue stream. And it was like, what's the difference now that you're owned by Oracle? And he said, look, Larry Ellison says, I don't care. Never talk to me about the consulting business again. The consulting business is the only job the consulting business has. It's not to make money. I don't care. Never report that again. I only care about driving the monthly recurring revenue out of the product business. And so the consulting business is not about making money. The consulting business is about driving product sales.
Yeah, so
I think if people think about it like that,
that's different.
Then it makes sense. But when they try to do it as two separate things, as two tips and types of success with two different types of core customer, then I think they end up splitting the business.
So this means the service, that's an interesting model. So the service stuff is more like the storytellers also, Well,
it's about, it's the difference between, I don't know. It's like staying in a hotel and creating an experience versus a thing, a pen. It's just so different.
So the
whole sort of customer journey, the purchase, the marketing.
Yeah. So in terms of focusing and bringing priorities into the business, would you advise in the most cases more to just focus on the one thing, or?
I think there's look. It comes back to, if you look at that sort of Jim Collins interlocking circles, you're like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
Like, what can you be number one in the world at? And then being really clear about what your economic model is, right? So if you want to build the number one pen business in the world, and that's what you want to be world famous for, look, you might have some services around pens, but you're a pen company, right? If you're a hotel, you might end up having your own label brand of spa stuff. Like you might have, Ritz-Carlton shampoo that you can buy. If I love Ritz-Carlton shampoo, I can buy Ritz-Carlton shampoo, but it doesn't make me a shampoo. I'm not competing with Procter and Gamble.
Yeah.
Like one is sort of an accidental profit maximization of the other, but it's getting really clear on.
And isn't it maybe also a wrong belief that services can't scale? Because there are great examples of scaling services or consulting, big consulting, global consulting organizations or things like that.
Yeah, you see, but Accenture scaled. They've got some good people, right? We scaled Rackspace to a lot of people. We scaled Pier 1 to, nearly 1,000 people.
Yeah. So it works,
right? But what we had to do is in those businesses we had to obsess about culture, right? And so it's like, oh, so you don't want to obsess about culture, so you're gonna become a product business. Okay, well, be a product business then. But what, you're going to be a product business with a crap culture? You're just going to be, you're sort of missing the point, I think, that you just got, like, who is our core customer? What problem of theirs do we solve? How do we be number one in the world at it? What was great is I've chatted to Herman Simon a couple of times, who's written that great book called Hidden Champions.
Yeah.
He's just done an updated called Hidden Champions for a Chinese Century. And he said, look, in Germany, because of the historical nature of it, this is his rationale for why so many of the hidden, when he first wrote the books, 2/3, I think, of the hidden champions were German businesses. And he said, look, German businesses sort of historically by default were global from day one, because in the not so distant past, Germany was actually multiple countries. And so, you've got manufacturers of something for the world, as opposed to, in other countries where, I sell this, so I'm going to sell this as well. I'm going to sell. So, in other countries, people tended to go broad rather than, I'm going to be amazing at, I don't know, ceramic ball bearings, and I'm going to sell them everywhere in the world. And he said, look, he said his own business, which is, the number one pricing strategy company in the world, would have been 1/10 of the size if they'd only stayed in Germany. He said it would have still been a successful business, but it wouldn't have been a global, it would have been 1/10 of the size. And so I think that is, what people are doing is they're saying, oh, well, we're doing services. Services is hard to scale. It might be easier to do product. Just be a global services business. Get good at that. If that's what you're passionate about.
Yeah. That's a good advice. Great. Dominic, let's talk a little bit about your podcast, The Melting Pot. Maybe just tell me, what's the idea? And are you doing it since when now? Since 3-4 years already, right?
Yeah, we're at 200 and something episodes.
Wow. Yeah, so you're far above.
So I started, when I started coaching, there's a friend of mine called Daniel Priestley who's written a series of books. One is called Key Person of Influence. And so if you're a sort of small business or a solo entrepreneur or even a CEO trying to be the figurehead of your business, then it's fabulous book to read. And it's about his thesis is that in any industry there are one or few people who are key people of influence, and sort of the 80-20 rule applies. Most of the opportunities go towards them. So I was trying to create some authority in the space around business coaching in the technology space to backstop my business. And I started off thinking I'd do a newsletter, and I hired a lady who was a radio journalist, and she said, Dom, you can't just do a newsletter, you have to do a podcast. And I went, okay. So we did 8 episodes, and then she said, Dom, working for you hasn't been as interesting as I thought it was going to be, so I'm off next week. Goodbye. So okay. I then had to either decide to keep going or carry on, and we carried on with both the newsletter and the weekly blogs and the podcast. And I find it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to contact people. Fred Reichelt, who invented Net Promoter Score at Bain & Co. So that was a tool that we rolled out at Rackspace. I used at IT Lab. I used at Pier 1. And so, if I'd rung Fred up and said, hey, Fred, can I talk to you for an hour? Be like, no, I'm very busy. Goodbye. But I say, Fred, could you come on my podcast? And I'm going to record talking to you, and I'm going to share it with the rest of the world. And Fred goes, yeah, no problem at all. Love to chat with you. So it's been fabulous to talk to. So I talk to CEOs, I talk to authors, I talk to experts. Sometimes there's somebody who's got a sort of niche expertise around maybe recruitment or social media or marketing, where I think it solves a problem that I've heard CEOs that I'm talking to talk about. And I regularly get people on LinkedIn or emails from people saying, listen to the podcast, thought it was brilliant, solved a problem for me, or you asked somebody said to me yesterday, you asked the questions. I'm listening to the conversation and I'm in the car and I'm going, ask him this, and then he said, it's brilliant because then the next thing you do is it's like I've made you do it through the ether.
Very good.
So I love it. It's
what is your learning curve?
I just learn something new every week.
Yeah. What is your learning curve in the podcast? What would you say? What do you do today differently than you did in the beginning?
You know what? It's funny. The first episode I think got five listeners. And even if it only got 5 listeners every week, I'd still get 3. I ask all the guests for sort of 3 book recommendations, and I read a lot of books, or I listen to a lot of books on Audible, and so I, if nothing else, I would get value out of book recommendations because people have. I mean, there are some things that come up regularly, but lots of times there's sort of an eclectic mix of stuff, which I think broadens my horizon, which is great, and I like it when I come off a conversation with somebody and I feel as though what I thought I knew to be true, I no longer think is true. So when somebody has, in the space of 30 minutes or 45 minutes, changed my view of something, I think that flexibility is very useful. You're not stuck in a pattern. It's like sort of a weekly exercise to get me thinking differently.
Okay. What are let's say the top 1 to 3 conversations you had and what you took out of them?
I think Fred Reichelt said that he's made more money out of his theory of customer service obsession than working at Bain & Co. So he said, net promoter score in a commodity space, the difference between 2 companies' net promoter score can explain 85% of the client movement from one to another. And so what he's done is in every industry, he's identified the public company that is the global leader in customer service in every industry. And he has a portfolio of stocks that is his personal investment portfolio, which you can see online. And he says that's outperformed the stock market. I think he said 3x. And so the fact that it's, you've got this net promoter score and you've got all this other stuff, but then you take it, you boil it down, and Fred goes, look, this is true. If you back this with your own cash, which is what I've done, this has made me incredibly wealthy, and I've made more money doing this than my job. And it's like, okay, that is absolutely brilliant. So I think that was a really good one. I really enjoyed talking to Kim Scott about radical candor, and she said actually she wouldn't call it radical candor if she wrote it again. She might call it compassionate candor. But she said if she'd written a book, if a middle-aged white woman in Silicon Valley had written a book called Compassionate Candor, it wouldn't have sold. It had to be a bit punchier than that. So I thought that was interesting because she said, look, we've come to believe that people use the radical piece to sort of, it's like when it's in organizations where people can use values against each other. She's found examples of that, which she said hadn't happened. So I think that was good.
Maybe one surprise, something that surprised you a lot. Surprising situation.
Blimey. I've gone There's two. I can't.
Yeah, okay. I
can't off the top of my head. I can't think of another.
Okay.
Great example.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Dom, there was a little bit back and forward before we made the podcast about the time. I think you do your podcast like 45 minutes or so.
An
hour maybe max.
I mean, it's sort of. Do you know what? It does depend on the guest.
Yeah.
So typically, I've got a recording slot of about an hour, and sometimes they'll run on for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But often, if I'm recording in the middle of the day, it'll be sort of 45 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm talking about a podcast we like. For example, I really love. Do you know Lex Friedman podcast?
No.
You should listen to that one. It's fantastic. It's a guy. He's in the United States, but he has, I think, Russian roots. So he grew up in Moscow, but he emigrated when he was like 14 years old or so. And he's an MIT guy into artificial intelligence. And he has so fantastic guests, scientists, but also guys like Elon Musk or so. And he has long podcasts. Some of them are like 4 hours conversation, but they are so exciting, so interesting that you can't stop to listen to them. So this is a little bit like a role model for me, although I'm far away from that. So this is why I sometimes like to have a little bit longer conversations because it's interesting. It's very successful. So because there's the belief you need to don't need. May not be too long because otherwise people, drop out or so. And I think it's good to have some time.
Well, outside of business, one of my, I suppose, interests is the medicine or the studying of longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a guy in the US, a guy called Peter Attia, who has a podcast called The Drive. Mm-hmm. And he will have somebody on about something in longevity, might be about heart disease or sleep. Matthew Walker, who wrote a great book called Why We Sleep, he had him on. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a 2-part podcast, and each of those parts was 3 hours, right? Okay. So he basically talked to him for a whole day and then split it down the middle. Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. There are those times when, that's like longer than a book on Audible, right? It's just a conversation.
Fantastic.
So, but many of those Peter Attia podcasts, I've listened to many of them more than once. Mm-hmm. Because there's just no way you can remember it all.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that one. I have to go to that because I think longevity is very, very interesting. I just know this Sinclair podcasts. David Sinclair, right?
Yeah. God, what's the name of his podcast and book?
No, his book is Why Do We Age or something like that. I think.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting subject. And why I like also for myself a little bit more space, more room is because my background is I'm a philosopher. So before I started business, I made a PhD in philosophy. And so I love to somehow talk about a little bit more philosophical things about, for example, purpose and things like that. And so maybe we can have a little conversation about those things. What do you think?
Yeah. That'd be fab.
Great. So, for example, let's start a very still scale up language. What is your big goal in your life, Dominic?
The purpose of the business, I guess, or my purpose, is to demystify business growth. Mm-hmm. I think that. I was reading an article this morning. Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister in the UK, has decided that she's going to cut taxes to see whether it is possible to cut taxes to grow Britain's economy out of the hole it's in. So we shall see. Although the markets don't seem to believe because the pound did not rally on the back of that news. So but that business growth, because I look at the financial success that we had at Rackspace and at Pier 1, but actually the things that I think about that make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up are, there was a guy called Jason who was the first guy I hired in the UK at Pier 1, and he had a job and he had a wife and he had children. And I met him in a hotel before we had an office. And I said, I think you should come and join me. And he joined, and I felt this overwhelming sense of obligation then. But, years later, he became a director in the business and then went to move to one of our clients. And, or other people whose lives were profoundly changed by the promotions that they got inside the business. And when they arrived, their perception of where they were now and where they would be weren't the same as the inkling that I had about them. And then you've got, you create a great place to work. And so people leave work on a Friday and they've done great work with great people, and they take that happiness back home to their families and their communities. And you realize that if you can build a successful business, you can have an impact on those human beings and communities. And so, and now when I work with CEOs, they've got hopes and expectations for their families and for their future and the futures of their executives and their families. And it's like, if I can help them fulfill that, then I am, vicariously helping them, helping the world, right? And so I get a great kick out of the work that I do. It's now the longest job I've ever had, being a business coach. And I only did it by accident. We sold Pier 1. I left a year later after this sort of integration was kicking off. And my daughter was born, who's now 8. Yeah. And I thought, well, before I get a proper job again, maybe I'll work from home, work for myself. Maybe I'll learn some skills that would make me a better leader. And then I found myself doing this work and going, oh no, this is it. This is the job. This is the job I've randomly been heading towards all my life.
But what a wise move at that time, because if you're once in this patterns of running and being successful and doing the next big thing, and then suddenly, how were you able to do this decision? What happened? Did you have a break or what was it?
I had I've been married twice, so my current wife and 2 children, and so there is a natural point where I've left Pier 1, and my first daughter's born, and I'm sitting down chatting with my wife, and it's interesting. It's sort of about regret. If you look back, would you regret not spending time with your children, or would you regret not going and finding another job and earning some more money? Well, probably, you need to earn some money, but probably regret spending time with your children. So it was that whole, I'm going to work for myself. I'm not going to spend, I'm not going to fly all around the world. That's what I'm going to do. I'll do some coaching and consulting. And then that sort of morphed into specifically business and growth and tech firm and scaling up with the tools we used at Rackspace. Rockefeller Habits is now 20 years old, but that was the sort of execution framework Bible at Rackspace. Yeah. And so, but at the beginning, I wasn't even coaching that. I was just doing in the tech space, doing sales and marketing consulting really. And then it became, scaling up. I know that I'm a practitioner. I've done that for 20 years. Let's help other people scale. And then sort of the purpose evolved. We, evolved that purpose in, let's try. And so then the podcast and the book and the newsletter and the work are all connected, because all of these things, like for a small proportion of the people, maybe 10 or 12 CEOs and leadership teams at a time, we're working with them directly. But actually, writing the book and doing the podcast is about helping much more people, many people scale up or demystify business growth.
That's beautiful. If you could jump forward now 10, 15 years and would look back, well, what would be the story you would like to see?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We've just been thinking about where might we be 25 years from now.
Okay, let's take 25.
So that would be, I'd be 80.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm 80, where are we living? What are we doing? I think assuming that I've still got my health and my marbles, I have some of the guests actually, Joe Weldon, who's Vern Harnish's speech coach. You were asking me about some other guests. So he said, he told me I should read a book called Younger Next Year, which I did. And in there, it basically said, look, after the age of 35, you should be spending 45 minutes a day doing vigorous exercise, enough to get you sweaty every single day.
Yeah.
And he and a couple of other guests in their late 70s or 80s have persuaded me that this idea of retirement is not one for me. So they said the hard thing is, though, that your friends become really dull because they have retired. But then if you look at somebody, I think I'll probably still be doing this. I mean, that is my plan. I have no plans. So it's now my longest job. It feels like there's a purpose. Maybe the things we do might evolve so that we change the way we have an impact, or maybe we change the focus on which subset of entrepreneurs we're aiming to help. But I think if I can keep doing that, and then, sort of shuffling off this mortal coil with my boots still on would be my plan.
Yeah, that's a good one. I had recently, I had a team, very nice. I liked him a lot. Bear Paw Products, and that's a very nice, very, very good young CEO. And he likes to ask good questions. And he once asked me, what would you do if you would learn that you have only 1 year left to live? And I was thinking about it, and it was so surprising to myself that it came very clear I wouldn't stop working. I would still see. I mean, I would shift certain things. I would maybe work less, but I wouldn't say now, okay, I stopped working. I need to do now the important things. I still would see a purpose in doing what I do. That surprised me a lot.
Well, I joined an organization called Strategic Coach. You come across it, run by a guy called Dan Sullivan. And Dan Sullivan has an exercise that he gets the entrepreneurs in Strategic Coach to take, which is when he asks people, when do you think you're going to die? Like, tell me the age at which you think you're going to die. And he said, what happens? Typically people go, I don't know, 75, right? And it's a function of the age that their parents died or something, right? So, but when you press people, typically they have a number. Yeah. And he said, how fit do you think you will be the year before, say 74? And they go, well, I think I'll be fit. And he's like, well, look, if you're going to be fit at 74, you're not going to die when you're 75. And they That's go, true. Okay. That's true. So he said, so now that I've asked you to challenge yourself about the 75, because you've agreed you're going to be fit at 74, typically, he said, people add 10 years. So they go 75, 85. And then he says, what are you going to do between 75 and 85? And they say, okay, well, you've given me these 10 years, so I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to do this. And he's like, okay, well, what's stopping you doing that now?
It's a good one.
And so it's this whole get people to tell a story for themselves and then turn that on its head. But like you, I don't have stopping working. I mean, I think I'm lucky to have found something I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And why would I not carry on doing it? I'm there are always clients that I'm working for free, because for whatever reason, I feel as though I can help them. So we've had a client that we've worked with for about last 12 months, as they were working their way through, I think, going out of business. During COVID, I worked with a local engineering firm who was absolutely devastated by COVID. And so, there are times when I'll actually work for free.
I do the same.
With no expectation that they become clients later. It's just, they don't have any money. I think I can help them. And luckily I'm being paid by the other clients. And so I know I would do this for free because I do it all the time.
Dom, you talked about family and taking time for families. What's about friends? What means friendship to you?
It's funny, isn't it? I was talking to somebody I hadn't spoken to, because COVID's been really weird. I speak to people and it feels as though I spoke to them only 6 months ago or 12 months ago. And then when we work it out, it's like 3 years. So I was talking to somebody who's back in the UK in November, and we haven't spoken for 3 years. But we were chatting about it, and because, we share photographs of our lives on Instagram, and you're only a text away. I don't know, maybe there's a male-female thing, because certainly the women I know who have deep friendships spend lots of time with their friends on the phone or in person. And the blokes that I'm friends with, you go 12 months and don't speak, and you still consider them good friends. So, but there's I think one of the scaling up tools, which I always find profound, is that one-page personal plan, and getting clients to write their eulogy, right? So write their eulogy and then say, okay, well, look, you're going to need some people to carry your coffin. Hopefully they'd be friends. How many of them do you think you already know? Are you investing enough time? I do deliberately each quarter think, okay, who have I not spent time with? Who should I try and spend time with? It's not up to them. It's up to me, if I want to call them a friend, to get on the phone and put something in the diary and try and do that. And I think one of the things is that another one of the things from Dan Sullivan is he said, don't be overscheduled.
Yeah.
Because from a business perspective, you don't have the space to spot opportunities. But from a personal perspective, you don't have time to keep those friendships in place.
Yeah.
And, when I remember doing the one-page personal plan as I was certifying as a scaling up coach and doing an exercise and realizing that one of the things I wanted to do was an action that I took from that was to take my children to school, the two girls to school. And I set my goal of doing it twice a week. I'd drop them off at school. And at the moment, I'm doing it every day. So that's fab. And I was talking to somebody about it the other week, and they said, well, what do you talk about when you drop your kids off at school? So this person doesn't have small children yet. So they were just intrigued. So I said, well, next time we have a conversation, let me send you a text and tell you what we talked about. So the next day I pulled into the car park at school, the kids jumped out, and I texted him back and I said, today's conversation was, what would the earth be like if there was no gravity?
Fantastic. Isn't it great?
And they wanted me to explain E equals MC squared.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, 6 and 8, you have deep conversations in your car.
Yeah, and this is what I experienced myself, yeah. But it reminds me on another funny story from my son. He's now like 19 or 20. And he, maybe 5 years ago, this already the generation, how you call them, generation head down, with the phones, always looking on the phones.
Yeah.
And he suddenly asked me, Konstantin or Dad, when you were young like me, you didn't have phones, right? I said, yes, no, we didn't have phones at that time. And he said, but what did you do then when we were with friends? I mean, did you have fun or what happened then? It was so funny. Were you able to have conversations? And I said, yeah, sure, we could have conversations and we had fun.
Well, my daughter is still in shock. She found out that I didn't grow up with playing Roblox, and the whole concept of not growing up playing computer games just makes her head explode. Same thing. What did you do? It's like it feels as though we lived in some sort of deprived century.
Yeah,
where it's like looking back at the Bronze Age, isn't it, for our children?
Yeah, Middle Age, dark Middle Ages.
Look, they didn't have telephones. Oh my God.
Okay, Dom. Maybe let's slowly wrap it up. There's one question I always like to ask: is if there would be like kind of an spirit or an genie or an angel or so, and you would have one big wish for you, or maybe also for the humanity. What would it be? What is your wish?
Oh my God. I think that I would wish for more transparency or more radical candor. Right? I have seen it transform my own life. I've seen it doesn't work for everybody. I've seen people quit organizations when they decide that they're going to adopt this as an explicit thing. But I think if done right, it has profound impact on everybody. Yeah. Things move faster. It's just that, all these things that are unsaid that should be said. Yeah. And it's better for the person who says them, and it's better for the person who hears them, and just more of that. Everyone going around assuming things and nobody actually getting clear on it. And, I often, when I'm talking to audiences, ask people, so look, I've been here for a little while. Would you tell me if you saw me in the break and I had spinach in my teeth? And about 30% of people just say, nope, I'm not going to do that. And you go, okay, why not? Just don't feel comfortable telling you, okay. And then I say, okay, well, what if my flies were down? Or if I was a lady and I tucked my skirt into my knickers when I came out the loo. And at that point, about 50% of people go, no, it's got too emotionally charged for me now. I'm going to let you walk around like that, even though I could help you, because somehow I can't. And then you say, okay, well, what if I had bad breath or I've got BO? At this point, it's like somewhere between 70 and 90% of people are going, no, you can count me out. You're going to get nothing from me here. And then at work, we see their work product, or we see how they show up. So I think the work thing is way more like, you've got bad breath, but I'm not going to tell you. You turn up in a meeting and you act like a dick. I think it, but I'm not going to tell you. So you've got no way of knowing. Like, you can't fix it. And so I think the world would be way better if we could do more of that for each other.
That's a good one. And I think it's somehow very close connected to this trust thing. We know both the Pat Lencioni five Dysfunction book, but it's, for me, it's so fundamental, this loop between trust and being candid, being true. And I think it's somehow like a circle. The more you are really authentic, open, true, the more trust you create. On the other side, the more trust there is in the room, the easier it is for you to be true.
Well, and also you have to be honest with yourself as well, which is why any one of these 12-step programs starts with, I'm Dominic Monkhouse and I'm an alcoholic, right? It's that you have to admit to not being perfect.
Yeah.
And then And then you're right, you can trust people if they're straight with you, because you can see that they don't have an agenda. Whereas if they don't say anything, you don't know what their agenda might be. And
yeah, you have to show something from yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's my personal belief. I think that being vulnerable, becoming vulnerable, and everybody's afraid about becoming vulnerable. And I think it's the opposite. It's a superpower. It's an absolutely power if you are able to become vulnerable.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've done some 5 dysfunctions work with some very dysfunctional clients. And actually, before we do that, I say to the CEO, are you prepared for some of these people to not be here? Like, because if we're going to, if we've got to guarantee to try and fix this and none of the players on the team change, my experience is it's not going to work.
Not going to work.
Probably somebody ends up leaving.
Yeah. It's my experience as well. Yeah.
Toxic A's find it really hard to change. So, yeah. They find it hard, but to start with, they find it hard to be vulnerable, and they lack curiosity. And that means that people stop trying to help them.
That's also interesting to think about that. Okay, Dominic, do you have anything left over? Any question or?
No, I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Yeah, me too.
It's been fab. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and I liked it a lot. It's a good mixture of very relaxed but also a lot of energy and going into the deep seas. Very nice.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing you in hopefully in your place or somewhere else in the world with all these fabulous scaling up coaches.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you too.
So thank you very much, Dominic Monkhouse.
Thank you very much indeed, Konstantin, for having me on.